I'm going to give a short presentation, and I'll be glad to do a question and answer period afterwards, although I may have to limit the questions depending on the number and type of questions that they are, because we have another presenter after me, Kohls, will give a short presentation after me as well. So please, if you can do me a favor, hold your comments, complaints, or war stories until the very end, and by the very end I mean both of our presentations. We'll try to stick around and answer questions and respond to comments and complaints and things like that as we can. Okay. Just a little background information. Educate Worthington is not anti-Levy. We are nonpartisan. We are not anti-teacher. You can call it every name in the book. I'll give you that. But I just want to be upfront about what our mission or our purpose is. Our goal is to educate about the finances, the situation with regard to state finances and finances as it pertains to the school. So if you could call us anti-anything, you might be able to call us anti-union contract. And I'll explain why in this presentation, why you might say that. But we prefer to consider ourselves pro-sustainability, pro-student, pro-taxpayer, and pro-Worthington. This word sustainability I will use several times throughout the presentation. So it's a familiar word, so we'll get comfortable with it by the end. Okay, for those who haven't seen the presentation, does anybody know what percentage of your property taxes goes toward the school? I hear 80, I hear 2/3. It's about 2/3 or 67%. So of your total property tax bill, about 2/3 goes towards the schools. So if you want to check out for your individual property, I encourage you to go to the Franklin County Auditor's website. You can do a search based on your name or your address, and you can look under the tax distribution section, and you can see for yourself what your tax breakdown is. Just a little brief history. There was a bond levy back in 2007. The bond levy is for capital improvement projects, infrastructure, things like paving things, repairing buildings, things like computers and phone systems. So, in fact, Educate Worthington made statements supporting the bond levy back in 2007. So in case anybody wants to say we're always anti-levy, I can show you statements that says that that's not true. The incremental levy, or operating levy, was passed in 2009. It was a total of 6.9 mils, slightly different structure than this one. But again, it was an incremental levy starting in 2009. Current levy, again, a different structure, 4.9 mils in the first year, 1.0 in the second and third years. If it passes the 4.9 mils, and this is just based on my taxes, I didn't do everybody's in the city of Worthington, but a 4.9 mil increase in my taxes will represent a 10% increase in the school taxes, just for my property. So I guess it's going to be very similar to your property as well. And again, this is the back of the envelope calculation for my property, and I made a couple of assumptions, but before the previous levy, you start with that amount in my school taxes. If this levy passes, it will represent a 35% increase in my school taxes over the 6 years. Okay, so now we've had one incremental levy pass for 3 years. We're facing another one this year. If you've read the papers, you've already heard a hint that 2016 will be another levy. They didn't say what style or type. I've also heard 2015, so that's just rumor at this point. But you have to ask the question, have we now reached the point where they want to increase our property taxes every single year? In other words, not whether or not our taxes are going to go up every year, but how much are they going to go up every year? It's basically the question. Okay, so given that, why do they need so much money, and where does the money go? This is the famous Hale graph. This is based on the 5-year forecast. And I could stand here for the next 2.5 hours and just talk about this graph alone. I'm not going to do that. I'll just try to give you the highlights. Okay? And before I forget, I want to advance one more. It's that little dash line. I'll explain that at the end. Okay, so what are we looking at here? We're basically looking at the general fund expenditures. The total operating expenditures for the city of Worthington, or the Worthington Schools. This does not include the bond issue or the bond portion, the capital improvements and things like that. That's been separated out. So this green, I assume it's green, I'm colorblind. This is the total budget going up and down. The green is the salaries and benefits portion of the budget, or the expenditures. And the blue is everything else. Okay. So salaries and benefits, and then everything else. Gasoline for the buses, toilet paper, books, lights, heat, air conditioning for the buildings, just basically everything else. This yellow line is the student enrollment over the last 10 years or so, starting in 2000, 2001. Back in 2001, we had 10,000 students, right around there. And we spent about $90 million teaching 10,000 students. Fast forward a little bit, now we're spending about 115, 116 million for about 9,400 students. So that's what I want to point out a couple of things. One is we're teaching less and less students, and we have fewer and fewer teachers as time goes forward. So in 2001, according to the Department of Education, we had 75 fewer teachers in 2010. 2012 had 14 fewer teachers than 2011. So the trend is we have fewer and fewer teachers teaching fewer and fewer students. Yet, as you can see by the slope of this graph, expenses keep going up and up and up. Okay? Why is that? Well, before I get to that, I just want to point out one thing with this little dashed line here. This is not all negative. I want to give credit where credit is due. If you remember your high school algebra, the slope of the line is everything. So the slope like this over these 10 or 12 years or 15 years or so is unsustainable. That steep of slope can't be sustained under practically any circumstance. And I'll explain in just a little bit. So the more gradual the slope, the more sustainable it is. So again, I want to give credit where credit is due. If you just look at these 3 years, 2007, 2008, 2009, and you extend their spending rate, the slope of that line out, you can see that it would have normally, under normal circumstances, they would have spent a lot more, a lot quicker. So through various means, they've made cuts, they've made adjustments, they've been frugal with regard to some of the things that they've done in terms of their budgeting and expensing. So I want to give credit where credit is due. Educate Worthington got started in 2006, so we can't, I won't take credit for this gap here, and I certainly won't take credit for this drop in the slope there. Yeah, it wouldn't be great if this slope went down like that, but no, you can't. And again, I'm not taking credit for it anyway. I'm just pointing out trends here. Okay. Is there anything else I want to point out? No. Okay, so I asked the question, why is fewer and fewer teachers teaching fewer and fewer students becoming more and more expensive? We started in 2006, about March or April of 2006. We looked at this issue kind of specifically for Worthington and a couple other districts as well. We noticed this trend back then. 3 months after we got started, the Dayton Daily News did an editorial and an analysis of suburban and urban districts throughout the state of Ohio, and this is what they noticed. In other words, they noticed the same thing that we noticed. School districts are using personnel cuts to fund instructional budgets, applying the savings to pay higher salaries and more expensive benefits to fewer teachers and other employees. So you see what's happening with fewer teachers, less students, but the costs keep going up, and that's how they were doing it. Now this is the same graph, essentially the same graph, but instead of student enrollment, this black line is revenue coming in from the state of Ohio and other sources. So there's a couple of things I want to say here. One is you can see that revenue normally hasn't been a problem. In fact, revenue has been increasing. If you take the overall slope of that line, it looks like the revenue has been increasing, matching the expenses. Now, the question I have, is that sustainable? In other words, would you expect the state to keep increasing the educational budget each year, every year, from now until the end of time? No, I don't think that's a reasonable assumption. In fact, if you look at this line right here, you can see we've got a change in direction here. It's going downward. Now, a lot of critics will say, well, it's the evil John Kasich, and he's taking all the money away, and it's all his fault. Well, you can make that argument, but what I'm going to say is, again, one, you can't expect this increase to be increased every single year from now until the end of time. That's just an unreasonable expectation. The other thing I'll point out is that at this point in the graph, there was an $8 billion deficit in the state of Ohio spending. Okay? So we have a constitutional provision that says we have to pass basically a passed budget every 2 years. So I guess Kasich could have done what his predecessor did and just extend a $2 billion per year deficit every year and just keep that graph going up and up and up. At the end of that graph, that would represent roughly a $20 billion deficit. Remember, education spending in the state of Ohio is the second largest budget expenditure item. It's only behind entitlements, Medicare, Medicaid, and those types of things. So they basically faced a crisis. They have to pass the budget. They have to balance the budget. And so where do you cut from? And you basically cut from your largest and second largest and third largest portions of the budget, not the smallest portion. Okay, so what does that mean for Worthington? Well, you can see as state revenue comes down and the spending stays steady or keeps increasing, you've got a gap here. And the larger that gap gets, the more frequent the levies and the larger the levies have to become to make up for that gap. It's simple mathematics. There's nothing you can do about it. So the larger that gap becomes, they have to make up the difference, and so they have to ask for larger and larger levies more and more frequently. This is the other thing. This is the same editorial that the Daily News noticed. This is, again, what we noticed about 6 months prior to this. They looked at the spending trend, and they said what's clear is that the growth in education spending can't be sustained under any funding scheme. Remember, back in 2006, this was an issue concerning a constitutional amendment. If we just get the state to fund, we just need a better funding model. The state needs to just basically pony up more money. So is this a spending issue or is this a funding issue? I will argue it is a spending issue. And the Daily News came to the same conclusion about the same time we did. Okay, just to drive the point home just a little bit further, the darker line starting here and going up is the average salary for a teacher in Worthington starting in 2001, going to 2010. This is from the Ohio Department of Taxation. Not this line, but this line. This lighter colored line is the Worthington average federal adjusted gross income through the Ohio Department of Taxation website. And you can see that it wasn't a problem up until about this point because everybody's making money, everybody's increasing their salary, everybody was happy until this point where the income in Worthington has suddenly dropped. Now more people are aware of their budgetary issues, and it becomes more focused. It becomes more of an issue. This is the latest data. So I don't know if the gap will get bigger. My guess is actually the gap will get smaller, at least for the next couple of years, because we've had a wave of layoffs last year and this year. And so I believe that average salary will actually come down a little bit. So that gap may actually get smaller in the short term. Okay, so let's rephrase the question. How did we get into this mess? In other words, why does that slope keep going up and up and up? Well, there's a couple of reasons. Actually, there's many, and I'll just talk about the major concepts. The number one spending part of our budget with regard to the schools is salaries. Salaries and benefits comprise anywhere from, depending on which year, 88 to 82.5, 82% of the budget. But what has led us to this crisis is decades of large base raises plus step raises. Now, a lot of people don't realize this, but teachers get 2 raises. Not 1 raise, 2 raises. They get a contract raise, or what we call a base raise, and then they get a step raise, an automatic step raise, or an experience raise. In other words, just for being there another year, they get another raise compounded on top of that. And what's interesting about the step raises is that they're heavily front-loaded in the first 15 years of service. So if I say, sounds like rain. Hopefully we don't get hail. The step raises are heavily front-loaded in the first 15 years of service. So when I say the average salary for a Worthington teacher is $75,000 per year, they actually achieve that average in less than 15 years of service. It's actually closer to 13 years of service because of these front-loaded step raises. You've heard, perhaps from the pro-Levy people, that the teachers have taken a freeze on their salaries. That's true, although you have to parse out some information. But let's just assume that we get rid of the base raises, in other words, the contract raises, the regular raises. Get rid of them, freeze them from now until the end of time. Well, in the contract, the step raises, if you freeze the base raise for the first 14 years of service for an M1 teacher, meaning master's degree teacher with a 1 year of service, 0 or 1 year of service, that teacher still gets an average of 4.3% step raise per year for the first 14, 15 years of service, for a total at the end of 15 years for an 80% increase. That's if the base salary is frozen. So the base raise would be on top of this compounded. Okay? Now I didn't do this analysis, or we didn't do this analysis for Worthington, but we did do it for Columbus Public Schools. Let's see, this is a teacher starting off in year 1 at this salary, and this darker, I believe, red line is a teacher getting the step raises plus the contract raise, which at the time I think was 2.5 or 2 3/4%. And then this is what her salary would be at the end of her 30-year career, starting at what, 40, almost 40,000, ending at $175,000 per year. Okay, well, let's take the same amount of raises. In other words, let's do the same base and step raises, but let's average them out over the 30 years. In other words, don't front load them. Don't put them all in the first 15 years. Let's just average it out over the entire 30. So it's basically the same amount, but it's distributed slightly differently. Well, this is what that second curve is. Now you could argue, well, that's not really much of a difference. If you look at the end, that's only a few $1,000s difference. Well, but it actually makes an enormous difference, because when it comes to retirement, it used to be based on the last 3 years of service, an average of the last 3 years of service. I believe they just reformed it. I believe it's now the last 5 years of service, but it doesn't make any difference. It's the same concept. That's an enormous difference for retirement. That gives a nice boost to the retiree. And then this bottom line is, let's get rid of the step and base raises and just give the teacher a 3% raise per year every year for 30 years. And let me just say for the record, I would love to get a 3% raise every year per year for 30 years. I would love that. In fact, I haven't had one for probably almost 10 years. So that's what front loading of the step raises does. It makes quite a bit of a difference in terms of the overall. And again, this is for Columbus, so if you multiply that by, how many teachers do they have? 3,000? 4,000? Yeah, I believe it's 4,000. Anyway, somewhere around there. And again, so this is just for one person. Multiply it by 3,000 or 4,000, or in the case of Worthington, it would be 718, I believe. Okay, the second largest portion of the budget is benefit costs, healthcare. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time with this unless you have specific questions. But you may have heard from the pro-levy people that, well, there's going to be a cap on the healthcare costs. That's true. The cap kicks in. The taxpayer pays 86% of the premium coverage. The employee pays 14%. So the cap will kick in if they elect family coverage when we hit a little over $19,000 per year for the taxpayer. Right now, they also have a high deductible, $3,000 deductible. This year, the taxpayers are responsible for the first 70% of it. That will be lowered. It will be a little more equitable starting January 1st, which, again, credit where credit's due. We have to appreciate the little extra that they're chipping in. I don't want to say much about pensions other than the employee contributes 10% of their salary into the pension system, the STRS. The taxpayer contributes 14%. So that's basically it in a nutshell. Again, I could stand here for another 2.5 hours talking about some of the nuances and all of the subtleties. But please, don't believe a word I said. Assume that I've been completely lying to you. I don't know what I'm talking about, so go verify yourself, please, and I'll give you some information here. But at the same time, I ask you, don't believe a word I say, but please, at the same time, don't believe a word they say until you get verification of their information and data as well. So, where can you go to verify for yourself? Look at the 5-year forecast. That hail graph was based on all the 5-year forecasts. Just go to Google and type in 5-year forecast Worthington, and you'll come up with various websites. That's a good one there. The Ohio Department of Education is an excellent website. There's a lot of information there, although I will say it can be very difficult to extract that data in a useful form. I've spent a few hours on it, and sometimes it can be just mind-boggling. I'll save you some grief. If you want to take a shortcut, just type in District Profile Report or CUP Report, C-U-P-P, CUP Report. And you can look how the spending and the budgeting is broken down by various classifications. Buckeye Institute is an excellent organization for information. I encourage you to go there and check them out. If you use any of their data, I'll ask that you make a generous contribution to them, as they are privately funded. And please, 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 do me a favor and read the Worthington Union contract. It's 132 pages. I don't expect you to read all of it, down to the subtle details, but kind of skim through it, at least the major subject headings. It's kind of an eye-opening read, so I encourage every Worthington resident to read it, and that's their website there. Okay, so how do we get onto the path of sustainability? How do we get to the point where we're not asking for a levy every 1 or 2 or 3 years, or conversely, instead of raising our property taxes every single year, stretching out the levy to every 2, 3, or 4 years? How do we get on a path where we can control costs, control spending, and make reasonable adjustments over longer periods of time? In other words, how do we look at the budget in a 10 or 15 or 20-year swath as opposed to a 1, 2, or 3-year swath? Get informed. You are simply attending this lecture. Makes you probably more informed than 80 to 90% of your neighbors. So talk to your neighbors, your friends, express to your parents here, express concerns to your teachers. Run for school board. It's a thankless job. But I'll just say as a blanket statement, the taxpayer has been sorely underrepresented on the school board for decades now. So if you're interested in running for that position, I wish you a lot of luck. Write your representatives, and this is very, very important. Write your representatives, meet with your representatives. A lot of them are very good about an open door policy. But there's some things that we absolutely have to change at the state level, and it would be very difficult to change at the local level. We have to eliminate the right to strike. That's basically the nuclear option. We've got to get rid of that. We just have to get that off the table somehow. Those step raises, I'm all for raises. I think people should be rewarded for good work. We need to have raises. They're an integral part of any kind of business operation. But this notion of having 2 raises compounded and having them automatic, that's basically killing us. So we've got to phase out these step raises. Pension and health care reform, I won't spend any time with that. The state is basically working on that. In fact, I believe they've just passed some legislation, or about to pass some legislation dealing with that, but we have a long way to go, especially health care. If you think health care is expensive now, just wait 6 or 8 weeks or months over years, because it's going to get, just making a prediction, it's going to get a lot worse. This one, last one, we're getting into the weeds now. I'll just mention that the master's requirement basically says that to work in a district you have to have a master's degree. There's been many, many studies that basically says there's no proof that having a master's degree increases the ability of either the teacher or the student to learn information. There is an exception to that, though. If you're in the sciences or the math, areas of math, if you have a master's degree in content, in other words, a master's degree in physics or a master's degree in chemistry, not in education or general pedagogy or something like that, if you have a master's degree in the specific content field, that does statistically and significantly, not significantly, it does offer a boost in terms of performance. Okay. Get toward the end here. So how can you make a difference? All I'll say, and it's just a blanket statement, if you vote for the status quo, you saw the graph, you're going to get larger and larger levies, more and more frequently. It's just simple math. Simple math and a question of time. That's all it is. You can yell at me, you can argue with me about the politics, and he said this, and she said that. I just let the math do the talk. And definitely the quality of education will decline, because as that slope keeps going up, and if they can't get enough levies, they can't get enough money to feed that slope, they're going to start pulling away from the other portion of the budget. In other words, they always pull from the 13% of the budget, not the 12 or 15% of the budget, not the 85 or 88%. So education will decline. Guaranteed. Other questions? But let Kelly give her presentation. She can answer a lot of questions as well. In fact, she covered my rear end several times, and I greatly appreciate it. Thank you very much. Okay, I will try.
Hi everybody, I'm Kelly Kohls, and I am the president of Spring Grove Community City School Board, elected in 2010. I'm also on the school board of the Warren County Career Center, president of the Ohio School Board Leadership Council. It's a conservative alternative to the association, which I would say that school board members get coached by a lot of people. I'm just trying to help coach people who are like-minded. I'm a conservative school board member, was elected by the majority. Unfortunately, the school board president didn't get re-elected, and I kind of came in, and then now I'm president of the school board. But I came in as a minority school board member, so there were 4 people not like-minded than me. And I have to say that we were much like Worthington in that the philosophy was the same. The negotiated agreement is something we can't touch, it's fenced off. We only have 15% that we can manipulate. That's all that's left, right? So we were going for 4 levies. 4 levies failed before I got on the school board. The community was so frustrated by our district's relentless requests, relentless scare tactics, relentless hardcore stranglehold that they had on the kids in the community, that while we were going for those levies, they instituted a pay-to-play of $475 per sport per kid with a max of $2,000 per family. They stopped ordering textbooks. They were off the schedule, couldn't order textbooks, didn't have the money. They reduced materials and supplies significantly in the classrooms. They stopped busing. They reduced the gifted services, special ed, field trips went away. So all of these things were instituted because we were in a desperate emergency financial situation, right? And I said, look, I'm just a mom of 5. I was a professor for 10 years, so I was in education, not K-12, but I think I understand education. I taught for 10 years myself. I think I got it. I'm educated. I think I can understand what a treasurer might have to say to me. I think I can understand what a superintendent might have to say to me. But more importantly, I have 5 children in the district. Every dime I own is invested in my home. I have every interest in maintaining the quality of education. But I had a no sign at the end of my driveway for all 5 levies. And the reason I did is that surely you had enough money to effectively educate these kids. Surely you did. And we don't spend anything like Worthington. We're at $7,800 per pupil. You're at over $13,000. It's really about twice, almost twice. So, and we are far wealthier community. Per household, our median household income is 61. Yours is 44. Significant difference. So we have wealth. So people could always say to us, well, you're not paying your fair share. All the rhetoric I heard only aggravated me more. I don't know about you guys, only aggravated me more. So, you know, I'm paying 10 grand a year in property tax. I think that's enough. I paid for 15 years before my first child entered the school system, and I'll pay for 15 years after my last child leaves the school system. So really, I thought, let me go in and say, I don't know what you're saying. I can't believe it's going to take more money. In 20 years, we voted ourselves more taxes 9 times. You know, where's the end is what I kept thinking. So I got elected, same thing. Guess what we did, guys? The other 4, voted to put a levy on the ballot. I voted no, that I did not think we had made the cuts that the community was asking us to make, and that's that salary and insurance figure. It's what it is. Let's talk about the white elephant in the room. So I said no. Well, it failed by more than it had failed by before. Dayton Daily, I don't use the term newspaper. I disagree. They, of course, endorsed the other candidates, not me, and I don't think they do that anymore. Lesson learned. I think it got me votes. In our area, we understand them to be a bit biased in their reporting, so I think it's helpful for a conservative-minded person, because when they read it, they think, okay, we're with her, not with them. And it works rather well. But what happened was we failed the 5th levy, and I kept saying, I don't think we should put it on. I think we're going to fail a 5th time. Let's try something else. So it failed the 5th time. My school board, which was not like-minded, and I just kept sharing the information, just like what he's doing here. So you fail this one or you pass this one, whatever, you still need to have the information. Do you need more money, or do you need to spend differently? That's all I'm saying. And I believed we needed to spend differently. And I had a number of suggestions, and there was a Educate Springboro group, just like your Educate Worthington group, who stood up at the podium, and they would give us a 12-step program for a spending addict. I mean, it's kind of funny. And they would tell the board members, and I was sitting up there with them, that there's 12 steps that you could make to save money so that you don't have to go for a levy. And a lot of it was the pay and benefit system to remodel that. And again, it's a negotiated agreement. But part of what we have to do is educate the community. I mean, if you look at the average teacher salary, it's $74,000. The household, usually 1 to 2 workers in the household working all year, is $44,000. Do you see the disparity? Sometimes it's a matter of just letting people see the disparity so that we can have the conversation with the numbers. Not just, you're just a selfish person that doesn't want to give me more money. I said, yeah, I have to buy that pizza. I'm always told it's just a pizza. I got 7 of us to feed that pizza to. So you're talking about a meal. You're not talking about a pizza. You're talking about a meal. And I've elected to give myself more taxes so that I go without less meals. Or I go with less meals. There, double negative. I go with less meals. And to our faculty and staff and people that were continuing to get the 5 to 7% raises while I lost 60 grand a year, you know, there's a disparity here, guys. I can't keep funding a lifestyle that I can't afford myself. Sorry. That's just the economic reality that we live in today. And somehow we've got to come to a meeting of the minds that the people in your community losing income are probably not going to wave, yeah, let me keep you in your lifestyle. I'm glad that you get to buy a new car, but my income has gone down over the last 5 years. And that's just the economic reality. So we talk real life issues. So last November, I think my community, you know, as outspoken as I am, decided that I had some good points. They elected 2 more of me. So in January, we took board majority of like-minded people, and now we have 4 of us because the president just couldn't take us anymore and quit. I'm vice president, and I just go right over to the next seat. Thank you very much. So now we get to talk as a group, but we're kind of on the same page with making sure that we have parity. Because I believe that if we go on the ballot for a levy, it's because we will absolutely need it, and then we've brought parity to a system that is totally out of whack. Totally out of reality with what the private sector is doing. You said, I heard you say something about, doesn't the market dictate that? I'll tell you what school districts do, many government agencies do, is they'll compare their pay to the next guy. And they'll say, well, we pay less taxes, the next guy pays more, so therefore we have to ratchet ours up to get to the next guy. Now, we had a position open for a first grade teacher. We had 1,000 applicants. At $34,600 starting salary, we had 1,000 applicants. So if we were to use market principles, do we have to pay $74,000?
That's a different district. I mean, does that happen in Worthington?
Do you see your districts here? Do you see that your comparable districts
No, I'm just asking if you have 1,000 people per applicant.
We're the only one. We're the only one that's not on there. Most of those districts are similar districts too. So your demographics are very similar.
I'm not talking about demographics. I'm saying it's supply and demand. If you want,
are you saying that? Well, Mark, you can help me out. How many applicants do you have for a teaching position? Is it like, how many does it take to say you're in the market? You're in the right place. Is it 50? Is it 100? Is it 300? Pardon me?
It's comparable all over the state. There are hundreds.
Hundreds, right. So again, if we're using the market to determine what that pay and benefit system is, I'm saying we've got a flooded market. We're not using market principles. We haven't been for a very long time. Should we? That's up for Worthington citizens to decide whether you should. I'm saying that Springboro decided yes. We need the market to dictate this price tag on this. We can't afford to keep giving raises when we don't get them ourselves. It's just common sense. We did a survey in our community, Educate, Springboro did, and they found that the healthcare cost split in the private sector, the people that responded, which was about 100 people, responded that their healthcare cost split was 50-50. If you look at, and I have a PowerPoint, and I can send you the PowerPoints because I have data and the references for everything I say on my PowerPoint. But she told me I only had 30 minutes, and my whole PowerPoint is more like an hour and a half. But the Kaiser Healthcare Study, our audit firm, did a performance audit on Springboro, and I used that. I actually went back and I showed my board members the things that that audit said. It was in 2009, so before I got there, I said, look, it's saying you need to get your healthcare cost split more in line with the national average. Guess what the national average is? And the national average combines private and public sectors. And we all know public sector is more like 10% cost split, and the private sector is more like 50. So combined, they're at 30. We're nowhere close to that yet. And you're right, it all comes down to that negotiated agreement. How do we negotiate something? I think a lot of it is educating. I have to educate the district employees just like I have to educate the community. The district employees, I want them to understand why the community said no 5 times. That it's got nothing to do with some personality conflict. It's not that we're selfish, self-centered, whatever you want to keep going with. It has nothing to do with that. It's that we understand the disparity, and we're saying no more disparity. Let's fix this, and then we're all for you. And if we go back on the ballot and we don't pass by 75%, I'll be embarrassed because I have not educated both sides. And my fear is that we will go back on the ballot. We're going to have a renewal. And I have not decided whether I'm going to support that renewal. But if we don't get that renewal, it will absolutely devastate our district. We didn't pass that levy, and it was 11% of our operating funds. This levy is very, very little. It's like a scratch. Ours was 11% of our operating funds. We didn't pass it. We went from a projected $30 million deficit when I came on the board to now a projected $12 million surplus. No new money, people. And there was hundreds of things that we've changed. And we've got a whole lot more that we're working on. Lots of little things and lots of big things. We did freeze base and steps for a couple years. We'll see what happens after that. I'm guessing, though, that now that the community is pretty well educated, if we do go all the way to a strike, that's going to be a problem. Probably not for the school board. But, you know, it's a public support. What does your community understand, and what are you willing to give? If you're willing to give some more money, then give some more money. Absolutely vote that for yourself. But I don't want to give more money or give the impression that you're going to fix any system. You're not going to fix it. You have to have reform. That's why I formed this organization called the Ohio School Board Leadership Council. I said, look, I'm not the only school board member that got on and it's like beating my head against a wall. Every time I looked at doing something, I was told, nope, can't do that. Nope, can't do that. Nope, can't do that. It's all in the negotiated agreement. We can't do that. Here's one of the things. You guys probably do it. Mark, you can answer me about that. But do you guys give pickup? You don't want to be pointed. Mark, share. Mark and I have had many, many conversations. So, Mark, do you guys give pickup here to your administrators?
Yeah.
Okay, pickup was one of those things that I gave to Dayton Daily. Notice I didn't say newspaper. Tabloid. And I gave them an article, and they barely made light of it. And I said, look, we canceled high school busing. And high school busing cost us $150,000 a year. But we chose to maintain this bonus system that we have for our administrators. It's called pickup. It's where your state mandated to pay 14% as a taxpayer, pay 14% of their income into their retirement. That's okay. That's the law. That's what we do. You know, we have Social Security. And the district employees pay 10% of their income into STRS, retirement system. Okay? But in districts like Worthington, and we weren't doing it in Springboro, we were paying their 10% for them. So it was like a $10,000 bonus. So we chose to continue that bonus, but cancel high school busing. So we couldn't afford to continue, and here's what I kept saying. We can't afford to continue safely transporting our students, but we can continue the bonus system that has now been cut off of most private sector jobs. And my board members would argue with me, of course. They weren't like-minded, but they said, no, it's a part of the pay. And then I asked legal counsel, well, actually my board president asked legal counsel, can we do away with that? And her answer was no. It's 3319.01. You cannot. The ORC code says that you may not reduce an administrative compensation package. I said, okay, wait a minute. Surely, they come up to the end of a contract, can't you offer them a new contract without it? You not renew this one and offer them this one. Take your choice. You can come or go. And, you know, the answer was, well, yeah, I guess you can do that. So it was possible. But what we get from legal counsel often, and now we have different legal counsels now that I have board majority, we got a different perspective on things. Okay, now we have legal counsel that now says, what do you want, board? Because that's what we're going for. So we went back to legal counsel and said, look, we're doing away with pickup. You tell us how to get it done legally. It's gone. Okay? So there's ways of getting some things done. If the board agrees, if you have a conservative board who says that's a bonus, if it were a bonus that the private sector were getting, we'd probably still support it. But it's not. It's a part of that pay system that it's nice. I'm grateful for the years that they got it, but it's not in our budget anymore. Just like my husband's perks that he used to get. Just like health insurance. Now we pay $20,000 out of our own pocket for our health insurance. We didn't have to pay before at all. So things have changed. We're living in a new economic reality. Start practicing that sentence. A new economic reality, and we all need to live there. Because all we're doing is creating divisiveness. When one segment thinks they're entitled to live their lifestyle that they've always lived and enjoyed, and I don't begrudge anybody their income, never have I done that. But if you look at ODE site, and it's a fabulous source, I've navigated it for many, many hundreds of hours, but if you look at Worthington household income over time, you'll see that in the last 5 years, the last 10 years, it's not changed much. Okay? But if you look at the income of your staff, it's changed considerably. Okay, so we're looking at a trajectory. I was able to show Springboro residents had an income trajectory where they would increase their income by about 2%, 2.5% back in 2009. And then it was 1.5% in 2010. And then it was negative 1.5% in 2011. And it's just going like this. And then I was looking at teachers under a pay, not teachers, I keep saying teachers, I need to say all staff, because I like to look at the whole district, not just one segment. And what I saw was that even under a pay freeze, their income was going up. So there was a difference in, again, that economic reality that I needed to share. And once we both understand, we're not going to be divided anymore. We're going to be on the same page that the kids matter. Now, I said I had 5 kids. 3 of them now have graduated from Springboro. 2 of them left at home. And I have to say that even without that those failures of 5 levies, without that money, we were named a Blue Ribbon School last year. Blue Ribbon Schools are named by the national government for schools that have exceptional progress in their different schools. We are a Blue Ribbon School, one of 7 in the state to be named. We have maintained excellence with distinction. Our average ACT score went up. Hey, I got a couple of them that got in the 30s. Help with college on a couple of them. But anyway, our progress towards education has become better. Why? Because we're holding everybody accountable. Everybody accountable. My business manager said to me last year that he's written up more people since I got there than he had in 10 years combined before I got there. And if we look back at records, now we're finding, the guys and me are finding that nobody's been written up in a decade. Nobody's been evaluated in a decade. Not even one administrator had been evaluated in a whole decade. Why is that? Well, nobody's being held accountable. So there's quite a few things we need to change in education, and it's holding people accountable for not just the finances, but are you doing what we're supposed to be doing? And if you're not, please part ways with us. Go find another district if you can. But we need to get the best of the best. And I say, you hear that, best of the best. We need to pay this to keep the best of the best because our teachers will leave. My point is, where would they go? Where would they go? I mean, with 1,000 applicants per position, I don't think so. If they've got a few years of experience, we told our HR manager, which I think all districts should do, you hire at the BA 0. That's it. That's all the money we're giving you, BA 0. And at the BA 0, we got that 1,000 applicants. So everybody started at the starting salary, 1,000 applicants. I'm just saying, again, and a master's degree, not shown to be effective. I've got a PhD, but I'm not going to get more money doing a job that doesn't take a PhD, right? They're not going to pay me more because I have these degrees that have been proven. It's been proven not to be effective for me to, I don't know, drive a backhoe or whatever I want to do. I would love to drive a backhoe. That was a good example for me to use. But I'll take that because I could go on for days. The things that we have done. I have to tell you that as a board member who came onto a school board, was not, superintendent was overheard saying that he wanted me nowhere near that district. This was when I was running my campaign. I don't want, I'm just a mom of 5. What would I do? How could I hurt somebody? I'm just going to ask questions. And I'm probably going to insist that you answer them. So it took me 4 months to get one of my questions answered. Actually, the union threw a ULP at me month 2. Superintendent resigned month 3. I had a very exciting first 6 months. The treasurer resigned month 2. It was all happening right there at the beginning. I'm thinking, this isn't all bad, because sometimes the philosophy shift means you might have to get some new blood. And we've done that. We've gotten a whole lot of new blood. And now everybody is on board with putting the children first. The children come first. We have now instituted a zero-based budgeting. Every classroom submits a budget to us. Just happened this summer for the first time. Every teacher says, here's my budget for the year. Here's all the supplies I need to teach my students, so that nobody can say anymore that we don't fund the classroom supplies, because they get funded first. And that teacher's salary is in that budget, as it is. And I've always said, guys, we don't need pay cuts. I would rather not do that to somebody. I've dealt with it in my household. Many of my friends are living on 1/3 of what they lived on. Lots of them. And they've left their homes. I mean, we've had the financial devastation before before the levy defeats. Now, our houses are selling again, even with all those 5 levy failures. So this whole scare tactic of your home value dropping, well, crap, the economy does that to your home value. It's not necessarily a levy passing or failing. We haven't noticed much of that difference. But zero-based budgeting means that we will fund what that teacher needs, because that's important to the education in that classroom. Second, the principal then takes all of their budgets from all of their teachers and puts it together and says, okay, and here's what I need. I'm going to add this to it. That's what I need, including their salary. That's funded. And then we get to this pyramid, and if you go to Educate Springboro, I think you'll see that pyramid. I think it's been shared with Educate Westerville, or your group. Right? You got that pyramid on your taxpayers for Westerville schools?
It's not on the website yet.
Okay, it's pretty cool. But we fund this the basics of the pyramid, the second tier, third tier, fourth tier. But fourth tier would be, you know, we used to budget where we fenced off what was in the negotiated agreement. Now we made a 5-year forecast that has 0 across on the increases in retirement and insurance. Now that might be unrealistic, but what we believe, I believe, is that if we put a 3% increase in our pay in our 5-year forecast, so each of those years we're putting 3%, 3%, 3%, then that assumes that's our start point. And that's not true these days. We're in a new economic reality. I think we should assume a 0 and try to work from there. Same with insurance. I think we should assume a 0 and try to work from there. And I would love to make sure that this negotiated agreement works out great. But again, we have to make each other see the new economic reality. Okay? So we have zero-based budgeting. We made a policy that we will not deficit spend. We will not spend more than we bring in. So we're going to have to make the budget work for a very long time now. We're not due for a levy for at least another 5 years. It'll be a total of 9 or 10 years since we were in an emergency situation. And we put back all the things we took from the kids. We put back busing. We reduced pay to play by 50%. We reduced student fees by 25%. We put back materials and supplies in the classroom. We put back field trips. We increased our special ed and gifted services. We put back all that stuff that was taken because it was falsehoods. I'm sorry to say, but my district was not telling the truth. And I simply said I won't be a party to that. I will tell my community the truth. When you say we've had pay freezes, that's not the truth. I'm going to tell them that you still have step raises and they equal 4% for teachers and about 2% for everybody else. That's the truth. And if my community says that's fine by me, great. But at least I've not disguised the facts of the district. Okay? We've done a lot of it. I said it took me 4 months to get this. Schedules of every teacher. Because he said, what? You want what? Why do you want that? And I don't think I have that. I mean, for months we went on, I couldn't get it. I just want to see the schedule. Every teacher, you give every teacher a schedule at the beginning of the school year. I know I was one. So I got a schedule so that I knew what my next class was. I finally got it. And what I was finding, guys, I was really disappointed, is that we had ratcheted up class sizes artificially. That they got up to 32 in one particular grade. My son was in there. I know. We're all thinking 32, that's above that marker for effective teaching. Why would anyone want to do that? No. Only if we were in a financial emergency. But it turns out that we had chosen a style of teaching that gave an extra duty to those teachers each day. So a planning period and a duty. So they had another hour off. And that was to talk about the students and their progress and whatever. It was a whole lot of words for what I saw was ratcheting up class size on purpose. And one of them actually admitted it to me. So there was ways that we were making that a primary concern to people with children in the district, right? Because you don't want your children in large class sizes. Anything over 27, I mean, I've read the research. Anything over 27 in the upper grades, like 5th through 10, are probably getting beyond your capabilities as an instructor to give them the attention they need. So at 32, yep, we were about 5 people over. We don't want that. So we did away with the duties, got some pushback on that, but now we brought class sizes back down to where they should be. So things are done with a different philosophy. It's a philosophy shift that you all need. Just my recommendation. You vote your conscience. I said this the other night. I didn't vote with my 2 buddies. We actually had a 3-2 vote the other night, and I was not with them. So there's shock. a shockwave went through the room. I said, I vote my conscience. I'm not afraid to have a 4-1 board. I had that for a couple of years. And I'm not afraid to have a 3-2. I vote my conscience. So that's what we need board members to go in and do. You have to use all the evidence you've got, make your decision, stand by that decision. If you made a wrong decision, then you go back to the drawing board and bring that policy back out and fix it. Okay, any questions?